Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Chancellor of the Exchequer if she will make a statement on the growing pressure of borrowing costs on the public finances.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year to you. I'm always grateful to see members of the opposite party welcome me to the House. Look, financial markets are always evolving, as the Shadow Chancellor knows. So it is a long-standing convention that the government does not comment on specific financial market movements, and I will not be breaking that convention today. Financial market movements, including changes in government bond or gilt yields, which represent the government's borrowing costs, are determined by a wide range of international and domestic factors. It is normal for the price and yields of gilts to vary when there are wider movements in global financial markets, including in response to economic data. In recent months, moves in financial markets have been largely driven by data and global geopolitical events, which is to be expected as markets adjust to new information. UK gilt markets continue to function in an orderly way. Underlying demand for the UK's debt remains strong, with a generally well-diverse investor base. The Debt Management Office's gilt sales operations continue to see strong demand, with the latest auction held yesterday receiving 3 times as many bids as the amount on offer. The Chancellor has commissioned the Office of Budget Responsibility for an updated economic and fiscal forecast for the 26th of March, which will incorporate the latest data. Only the OBR's forecast can accurately predict the effect on the public finances of any changes in financial markets or the economy, and I will not preempt their forecast. There should be no doubt of the government's commitment to economic stability and sound public finances. This is why meeting the fiscal rules is non-negotiable. But can I end, Mr. Speaker, by saying that I'm pleased the Right Honourable Gentleman is holding this government to account on our stewardship of the economy. It is important that he does so, because he will remember when his party crashed the economy with unfunded tax cuts, unrealistic public spending cuts, a clear disregard for the consequences for family finances, leaving families across the country still paying the price for their disastrous performance on the economy with higher mortgages and bills. If there was one clear reason why the Conservatives suffered such a historic defeat at the last general election, it was because of their performance on the economy. And presumably, Mr. Speaker, that is why the Shadow Chancellor himself admitted in December that the lack of trust in the Conservative Party's management of the economy has left, and I quote, a deep and painful scar in the pockets of every person across Britain. And let me tell you what has changed. Let me tell you what has changed, Mr. Speaker. This Labour government has, in the first 6 months, exposed the £22 billion black hole in the public finances. Not only have we exposed it, we have dealt with it, with the Chancellor's autumn budget, protecting working people, wiping the slate clean from the mess the Conservative Party left the country in, and investing in our NHS and our schools. We've given the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility enhanced powers of oversight in law, so that we will never get into the situation again where that lot left the country with a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. We have set tough new fiscal rules that are non-negotiable, with a budget settlement for public services that they must all live within. And we have kick-started growth in this country, the #1 mission of this government, by unlocking investment and bringing forward reforms, for example, in planning and the Mansion House speech. So might I say, Mr. Speaker, to the Right Honourable Gentleman, that this is in stark contrast to the negligent, shameful horror of a circus performance that the Conservative Party unleashed on this country when they were in government a few years ago. And until he can come to this House with an apology for the British people, I will not take any lectures from the Conservative Party about how to run the economy.
Right, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mel Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A slightly anxious and breathless performance, I think we've just seen. Which leads me to the question, where is the Chancellor? It is a bitter regret that at this difficult time of these serious issues, she herself is nowhere to be seen. Mr. Speaker, in the last 48 hours, borrowing costs have reached a 27-year high. And it is the Chancellor's decisions that have led us here. Before the election, the Right Honourable Lady promised that Labour would get debt falling. They would not fiddle the figures, they would not raise taxes, and they would grow the economy. But the economy is now flatlining. Survey after survey is showing business confidence has simply evaporated. And at the budget, Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor hiked up taxes, increased borrowing by an average of £32 billion a year across the forecast, and conveniently adjusted her fiscal rules to allow her to do it. Higher debt and lower growth are understandably now causing real concerns among the public, amongst businesses and in the markets. And despite what the Right Honourable Gentleman says about international factors, The premium on our borrowing costs compared to German bonds recently hit its highest level since 1990. With these rising costs, regrettably the government may now be on course to breach their fiscal rules. And the Chancellor has committed to no further tax rises. So does the right honourable gentleman stand by her commitment not to increase taxes even further? And if so, does this mean that the public should expect cuts to public service spending if the OBR judge her fiscal headroom has evaporated? Mr Speaker, there are media reports that the Chancellor will make an emergency intervention to soothe markets, but with no confirmation that this will occur in this House. Can I ask the right honourable gentleman to confirm that any such statement will be first made to members in this House? Mr Speaker, rates on government bonds ultimately feed through to the broader credit market. So what estimates has the Treasury made of how recent market movements will impact mortgage costs and lending across the economy? Mr Speaker, I make one final point. Every pound we spend on debt interest is money we cannot spend on the public's priorities. Yeah. The government's decision to let rip on borrowing means that their own tax rises will end up being swallowed up by the higher borrowing costs and at no benefit to the British people. Far from this government laying the foundations for a stronger economy, the Chancellor is squandering the endeavours of millions of hard-working people up and down our country who are now having to pay the price for yet another socialist government taxing and spending their way into trouble. Does the right honourable gentleman not now accept that it is time to change course?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased the right honourable gentleman enjoyed my performance. I've not even had my first cup of coffee yet this morning. Look, let me answer some of his questions. Honourable members on the bench opposite might like to listen if the questions are so important to them. He asked me about Mr Speaker, he asked me about the fiscal rules. As I said in my statement just now, they are non-negotiable. As the Chancellor set out of the budget, we have two fiscal rules: one, that day-to-day spending should be met by tax receipts, and the second, that debt should be falling as the size of the economy. And he talked about the debt burden this country has. Maybe we should just reflect a little as to why we have so much debt. It's because pre-pandemic, Mr Speaker, if you look at the burden of debt inherited by this government from the party opposite from 2010 onwards, why did the last government have to borrow so much money every single month, not just to invest, but to pay the day-to-day bills? Because of an absolute failure to get growth into the economy. They could not make the numbers add up. They've stacked up the country's credit card. They've left it to this party to deal with, and we are going to deal with it. That is why these fiscal rules are non-negotiable. That is why public spending will be within the numbers set out at the budget. We're starting the spending review now. It will conclude in June. Public services will have to live within their means. The Chancellor has been very, very clear about that. And that's why, with this government, you get economic stability, absolute clarity on public spending, and that is why the British people trust this party and booted that lot out of office.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And we all know that fiscal rules and certainty are vital for the markets and for the good stewardship of the public finances. So will the Chief Secretary explain now what process he will be going through as he's conducting the spending review, and what notice he will give to departments about extra cuts that they may have to make in order to meet the fiscal rules? And in addition, will the Chancellor now, when she comes in front of the House for the OBR forecast in March, be making a fiscal statement at that point?
Minister.
I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for her question. As the House knows, we have started the second phase of the spending review to set public sector budgets from 26-27 onwards. The Chancellor confirmed in written ministerial statement before the House rose for Christmas that there will be a forecast from the OBR and a statement on the 26th of March. That will be the next time, as I said in my statement, where the OBR will give a view about the UK economy and the levels of funding for public services. And so between the OBR forecast in March and the conclusion of the spending review in June, the House will then be updated in the normal way through those two events.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I recognise that the Chancellor had a very difficult job. She inherited an economy on its knees following Conservative mismanagement of the economy. From their terrible trade deal with Europe, which is holding back businesses in Wokingham, and soaring inflation, to stagnant growth and the Liz Truss mini-budget, which hits so many mortgage holders across the country. However, the government seems to be repeating some of the same mistakes. Last night, the Treasury issued a statement saying that meeting the fiscal rules is non-negotiable. Will the Minister reassure this House that protecting the NHS and care is also non-negotiable and rule out any cuts to those services as the government tries to balance the books? And will the Minister work to repair our ties with Europe and cut trade-related red tape, especially in the face of Donald Trump and his oligarch allies like Elon Musk?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his question. He will note from the Prime Minister's plan for change that the NHS is one of the key commitments of this government, with our commitment to get the elective waiting list down and to be investing in the National Health Service in order to be able to do that. He will have seen that from the Chancellor at the budget in autumn, and he'll see that as a continued commitment from this government. We can do that because of our commitment to the fiscal rules and because of our investment to grow the economy. That is the only route to long-term sustainable public financing. And might I just say to him, when he was very rudely groaned at by members of the Conservative Party, that when they groan about their performance on the economy, it's not them that should be groaning, it's the British people groaning at them for what they did to their family finances.
Stephen Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. US bond rates are rising as well as those in the UK because of higher expected inflation and interest rates. And I know the party opposite hasn't mentioned that. Perhaps they haven't looked. The best way to make our debt sustainable is to invest to get growth growing and to get expected inflation down by investing in clean energy. So would the Minister agree with me that our plans to invest in growth, to invest in lower price, cleaner energy is exactly the way to make our debt sustainable?
My honourable friend knows very well that this government's approach has been around stability, investment and reform. The stability that we've brought from the chaos of years under the Conservative Party, recognised by the British people and by the markets, investment that we've been unlocking from our Global Investment Summit all the way through to the work that we've been doing in the budget and since, and the reforms that this government are bringing forward, for example, in planning reform to make sure that we can deliver infrastructure better in this country and unlock the investment that the private capital has wanted to put forward in the UK for many years, but couldn't because of the chaos from the Conservative Party when they were last in government.
Father of the House, Sir Edmund Lee.
On the 6th of November, the Chancellor said, and I quote, "We have now set the envelope for spending for this Parliament, and we are not going to be coming back with more tax increases or indeed with more borrowing." So I'm sure, because the Chancellor is an honourable lady, she will not be opening that envelope, putting her sticky fingers inside and coming out with more borrowing or tax increases. Will the Minister give an absolute assurance no more tax increases or borrowing?
Minister.
I can absolutely assure the Father of the House that as we are now working through this spending review, it's on the basis of the envelope that was set at the budget. Public services will have to operate within the means that we're providing to them. The OBR forecast will come in March, which will then give us the latest set of information which we will work to with departments. But this is why we have set up organisations like the Office for Value for Money, where we've set tough productivity and efficiency targets for departments, and why we're investing in, for example, technology to improve the productivity of the public services we provide, because public services must live within their means as set out by the budget, and that's an absolute guarantee from this government.
Torsten Bell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement. I just sat through transport questions, or some of it, where I repeatedly heard calls for more spending from the benches opposite, but they oppose every single tax rise to pay for that spending. So does the Chief Secretary agree that one of the lessons from global developments in recent days is that we must pay for day-to-day public spending through tax rises, however tough that is?
I very much agree with my honourable friend that you have to pay for day-to-day bills with the income you generate day-to-day. And the lesson that we learnt from the party opposite is what they were happy to do, which this government is not. They were happy to announce plans and programmes to make promises to the British people, even though they knew they didn't have the money to pay for it. That will never happen under this Labour government.
John Glenn.
Mr. Speaker, by saying that she would set the envelope for spending for this Parliament, and that she would not come back for more tax increases or more borrowing, the Chancellor's assumptions when making that statement to the Treasury Select Committee on the 6th of November were based on assumptions around the cost of borrowing. Those are manifestly in significant doubt, to look at it at its most charitable.